Welcome to Real World Real Estate, where we will explore, examine, and explain the real process of buying or selling real estate. Here is your host, Stephen Clyde.
Hi, everybody. Stephen Clyde here, your host of Real World Real Estate with RE/MAX Preferred and RE/MAX at Cherry Hill. And today we're going to be talking to one of our polite cousins up north in British Columbia, out on the west coast of Canada. Most of us just know our Canadian neighbors when it comes to real estate because all of our HGTV shows are filmed in Canada. And pretty much every one of our movies and a good portion of our TV shows are filmed in either Toronto or Vancouver because they're American Light. So it's my pleasure to welcome Jane Johnston, who's a fellow RE/MAX agent, fellow member of RE/MAX Chairman Club, which puts her in the top 1% of all 130,000 plus RE/MAX agents worldwide. She's based out of Victoria, British Columbia. So Jane, thank you for taking the time to join us. So really the only thing I know about BC is skiing at Whistler. I don't know anything else. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and BC and Victoria, and educate us a little bit on Canadian real estate market right now and what buyers and sellers should consider when they're in BC or they're looking to buy or sell in BC.
Okay, well, actually, I'm originally from Toronto, so back your way. I came out here when I was a teenager, actually. I did an outward bound course in British Columbia in the mountains. And then when I was in my 20s, got invited to come and teach here. I was a high school and university professor. At that point, I just taught high school. I was new to teaching, was in the 90s. And I came to Vancouver Island, and I just thought, this is the most incredible place. I'd gone to school in kind of a mid-size town, and then I went to another university near Maine in New Brunswick. And I just loved the size of the city. Victoria is about 350,000 people, Greater Victoria. It's located on Vancouver Island, where I like to say to Americans, we're close to Seattle, we're south of Vancouver. So if you look at a triangle, we're kind of at the pointy end of the triangle. And we are under cover of the rain shadow of the Olympic Mountains, so we don't get a lot of rain here. Okay. And we are also a cruise ship capital, so a lot of people may have come through on a cruise ship and gone to our downtown. It's very pretty. We have kind of a British feel, and we're known as the Garden City. So,
just like the Garden State of New Jersey. So if I'm taking an Alaskan cruise, am I going through Vancouver Island and Victoria, or am I making a stop there?
Usually either Vancouver or Victoria. Yeah, you'll stop. Or anybody going up the coast stops here. I think we've had upwards of 500 cruise ships normally coming through. And Obviously this year we haven't. Okay.
And I mean, I wasn't joking when I said that all the HGTV shows are basically Canadian-based for the most part, and Vancouver gets most of our movies and television shows filmed there. So is Vancouver Island more of a tourist-based community, or is there a business industry there as well, or is it fishing-based, or?
No, we're the capital of British Columbia. So we have we have the legislature here, and obviously white collar industry. So very, very stable. We are also a Navy base. So we have military people moving in and out, and that fuels our housing stock usually twice a year. Okay. And then we also have universities and colleges. There's 5 of them. And then we also have prisons.
Yeah, we have our fair share of those as well.
But what it means is compared to elsewhere, like if we were to compare to Calgary or anywhere in Alberta, we're not volatile like those 2 economies. We're more like Toronto in terms of how steady it is. But I will say a lot of people here cobble work. They don't tend to work like in Toronto, you could be an esthetician and you would do that full time. Here you'd be an esthetician in something else because you wouldn't be able to, there's just not the pool of people to fund a lot of industries. But that being said, what I've noticed in the past 20 years is we've had a lot more people moving in and we have a net migration. So there's a lot of pressure here to develop the economy, but the housing hasn't kept up. So our average price of homes has increased considerably.
We're facing that, down here in America as well, across the country, New Jersey and South Jersey, where I am, to an extreme. So we had a severe housing shortage going into COVID-19, and that's just been exacerbated ever since. So right now in my market, our inventory year over year is down 64%. And I was just speaking to an agent, still on the East Coast, but in North Carolina, they're down over 35% year over year inventories, which our buyer demand was substantial prior to the quarantine. It never slowed down. And then when we throw in that shortage, we're in an insane market that makes the mid 2000s look calm, right? This makes 06 and 08 look like a standard market. This is just, we're crazy right now. Are you seeing the same effects, in British Columbia that we're seeing here?
Well, I have a little graph, which if you want to share, if you take this to visual, but I can explain it. So what happens is normally in the spring, we have a big bump in our inventory. And this year, obviously, it was cut off in March. And April, it went right down. It went down 55%. But it went back up, not to the levels it normally would. It was probably about 60% of what it would normally be. And then in the past 2 months, we've had a bump again and up 50%. So actually our inventory is exactly the same, almost exactly the same as what it would normally be. So our sales are up. And so year to date, as of September 1st, the number of sales per year has been identical +1 to last year. And then inventory is just slightly less, but we only have about 2,500 homes in Greater Victoria for sale right now. And I'm talking everything from condos.
So out of 350,000 people, roughly, you have 2,500 homes available?
Yeah.
And I mean, we're normally looking on a population turnover when we're talking in the South Jersey market of roughly 10% of a population turnover here in our housing inventory. So if you're running on the same numbers that we are, that means you have 35,000 people that are looking for a home, and there's only 2,500 available for them to take advantage of. Is that about right? Or
yeah, and what's happened is they've all gone for houses. They're all moving out of condos. There's been a big movement out of condo buildings for a couple of reasons. One is people are trying to get rid of any Airbnbs because they're not popular, obviously, during COVID.
Right.
The second reason is they don't want to share airspace with people they don't want in their bubble. So like even getting in the elevator is an issue. And then the third thing is they want to reconfigure the way they're living with their home. So often they're wanting more space, not only on the exterior, but also in the interior. So I get a lot of people saying, I want 2 living rooms, please.
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing the same thing here. So my market is about 17 miles from Center City, Philadelphia, and we're about 90 miles from Midtown Manhattan. So we're seeing an exodus out of those 2 cities, right? And obviously we had a compound effect here in the United States, right? So they were quarantined for 3 months in their condominiums or their townhouses without any outdoor space or anywhere to go. But then we figured we'd really test them and we'd throw rioting and looting at them simultaneously to see what occurred. And we're seeing a mass exodus of those city dwellers now coming over to the suburbs because they want the outdoor space. They need the home office. They need another home office for homeschooling because our schools aren't fully open yet. They're both working from home. And then a new phenomenon that I don't think is going to change, but I could be wrong, in that the large employers are saying, yeah, this virtual thing worked. You don't have to come into the office. You can work virtual now. So they don't have to worry about being near the commuter line or the highway to get into work at 8 o'clock in the morning. They're just getting to their home office. So would you see, if that occurs in Canada, would that be an exodus from Vancouver down to your area or to the surrounding suburbs, or?
So it's an exodus from Vancouver. It's also an exodus from the U.S. So we're having Americans move up here. And what BC did a number of years ago was implemented a foreign buyer tax. So they have to pay 20% extra. So they're going to be on par with what's happening in the US. So often what they were doing before was they were cashing out and then coming here, and it was a bit of a deal. And now they've just tried to bring up the market price to comparables to US values. We've seen that people from the West Coast primarily. Actually, this morning I had a call from a guy from Florida whose wife is Canadian. She's moving up here. There is normally a bit of a brain drain of Canadians who go down to the US for college, and then they get hired away, or the pay is better in the US. But I'm finding now people are repatriating and liking the lifestyle, liking the fact that if they get sick, they won't lose their whole income, that they'll be covered by our medical. And just, I'm friends with a lot of people in the US because of the training that I've done through REMAX and other organizations. And it's just been sad to watch the impact of COVID on not only your housing, but just everything.
Oh, it's had significant impact across the board. Everything from the economy, the housing market, our healthcare system being overtaxed, our insurance carriers, or lack thereof for certain individuals. Yeah, I think it's had a massive impact that it's probably going to take us years to actually fully understand and comprehend what has just occurred in the last 6 to 7 months. And yeah, I don't think it's something we're going to realize for a long time to come. So I find this tax interesting. So if there's a $500,000 home for sale in Victoria, and a Canadian steps in to purchase it, they can just pay the $500,000 for it. But if I'm moving up from the United States and I'm still an American citizen, I'm going to pay $600,000 for it?
Yeah. It depends on where you're buying, actually. So it's in the major centers. And what they're trying to do is tell people, okay, so if you're going to purchase, we don't want you to purchase in Victoria, Nanaimo, all the big urban centers. We want you to purchase outside of those centers. So you could drive 20 minutes north of here and you would be out of that. So they're trying to push people away from Victoria itself.
So is that's not 20% that's going to the seller, I'm going to assume. That's a 20% closing cost penalty or tax that's going to the Canadian government then, or the province.
That's correct. And so it's kind of funny because we are in terms of how our economy is, we need skilled workers from other countries. So what happens is if you get your permanent residency, which is a government program, within 12 months, you can actually get that 20% refund back. Or you can get 20% back. Okay, so I have a client who is a British engineer, and what was happening was he was hired specifically for work here in Victoria, and he had to pay this foreign buyer tax. He had to apply for his permanent residency, which was actually already in place, the application. And then he had 12 months to get the refund and get the permanent residency situation all settled so that he could get that money back. And he did get it back, but one's a federal program and the other's provincial. So they don't talk to one another. So it's a bit stressful for the buyer.
So in that respect, Canada and the United States are identical. The states, the counties, and the federal government do not communicate with each other at all.
Yeah, and so we also have some people who just want to live in Canada, who maybe politically they just find they align more closely with our values, and it's just hard for them to make the move. Like really, what the provincial government's done is push people back and said, "Don't come here. We're not your investment." So it's sad, especially because what happened was the tax came in, and anybody who bought new construction, the construction date was far out. So then the tax came in between the purchase date and the completion date, And so then all of a sudden, like $1 million became $1.2 million. And so one of my buyers was wanting to kind of get out, and then and so we examined all the possibilities, but the developer was really smart and had a huge deposit, so they didn't get out.
So when they instituted it, they didn't create a grandfathering effect that if I was already under contract and just hadn't settled yet, I was exempted out. They backdated it basically.
Yeah. And I find anytime like a big policy comes out like that, it just causes the whole market to hesitate.
Yes.
But the thing is that people with money still have money. And so what it does is it marginalizes people. And then there are people who are sending their wives and kids here to school. This is another situation, a guy from Turkey. And he wanted to buy a house here. He was a pilot in Turkey. And then all of a sudden that tax, because his wife and child aren't permanent residents because they're on student visas, now he can't buy here. And so to me, it's kind of a bit of what we used to call a head tax here.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's use me as a hypothetical. I decide, you know what? I've had enough of the Northeast in the United States. I'm doing a change. I'm going to move to Victoria, restart my real estate business. I'm going to go to work for Jane as a buyer's agent. But if I come up there, I'm not going to be considered that skilled labor, right? I'm going to be, even if I get my permanent residency, I'm not going to get that back because I'm not a skilled labor they need. Right?
No, you'll get that back if you get your permanent residency.
Okay.
As long as you're employable.
So, speaking of that, if someone is relocating to BC and Victoria specifically, what does the real estate market look like? So if a buyer was coming into New Jersey right now, they're going to work with a professional agent, select their home, make an offer, but we have a lot of different mortgage programs that are government backed, right? So we have, what we call our FHA, which is a HUD guaranteed mortgage, which is for anybody, but primarily first-time home buyers that have limited funds, where the seller can pay all of your closing costs. You only have to put down 3.5%. We have one for our veterans where they don't need to put out a penny from their pocket to get their mortgage. And then, of course, we have the normal conventional stuff, 5% down, 20% down, jumbos and everything. If I'm coming into Canada, do I have similar programs from the Canadian government available as a buyer, or is it just a standard conventional mortgage and that's it?
There's a program you can take out, what's called your RRSP, your Registered Retirement Savings Plan, and you can use that, a portion of that, but then you have to pay it off. So you have 15 years to pay it off. So you pay off 1/15 over 15 years, right. And that can be served as your down payment. If you choose not to pay it off, you can include it as income over the next 15 years. There's first-time homebuyer programs. So if you are purchasing, you don't have to pay our property transfer tax, which is 1% on the first 200,000, 2% on the balance. And that goes up to a certain amount of money. And it's kind of like from, I think it's 500 to 550. At 500, you pay nothing, and at 550, you pay 100% of that. So there's pressure for first-time home buyers to purchase under $500,000. And then if you're buying new construction, now these are provincial programs. Right. If you're buying, the first one's a federal program. If you're buying new construction, we have a goods and sales tax, GST, which is 5%. And if you buy under 700,000 and up to 750, it's also graduated at that point. So at 750, you pay, no, up to 750, it's 0, and 750 to 800, it's graduated. So you really want to get new construction under 750 as well. So it's a bit of the tail wagging the dog. Other than that, what I usually do is I work with a mortgage broker, and then different banks. We have federal banks as opposed to provincial banks. We also have credit unions, which are provincial. And then they have different programs that are incentivized to bring in different types of people. And right now the interest rates are crazy low, like less than 2%.
Yeah, you're a little bit better than us then, because I think right now on an FHA, which is a government guaranteed loan for us, we're at 2 3/8, and then our conventional 20% downs are right around 2 5/8. And then here in New Jersey, we have a unique program to help out our first responders. So our police and firemen, as long as they're active and still paying into their pension system, the pension has decided to invest in them instead of invest in Wall Street. So they use their own pension money for their mortgage, and they pay 1.5%.
Wow.
30-year fixed. But I think it's a great program because the pension's not really taking any risk. They're investing back in their own members and their members' housing, and it allows our first responders to afford to live in the communities they're serving. Because some of these, their salaries don't correspond to our median sales prices.
Yeah, I was going to say we pay our guys a little more.
Oh, they're paid well, but our prices get a little crazy in some areas. So speaking of that, I just graduated college, I've got my savings, I've got a great credit score, I've got, let's say $100,000 in the bank. Where's my entry point into BC real estate? Where's the first time home buyer's entry point there? Is that in that $1 million range or that $400,000 range, or?
Go to slide 5 that I sent you.
Okay, fair enough. I can do that.
Oh boy, this is a big bone of contention. So basically it's not Victoria.
Okay.
So I have buyers right now who are in that situation. They have cash. These are all the different areas of Victoria. We have 13 municipalities.
Right.
And Saanich is so big, it's divided into 2. That's our most active area. But if you go down on the bottom, it shows with price ranges, and you can see for homes, we're looking really at $500,000 to get in. So with $100,000 down,
You're okay.
We have 20%. They're going to avoid what's called our CMHC insurance, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Insurance, but they're going to have a hard time finding a property. If you go up a bit to the right, you can see they have to go to Souk or the Gulf Islands. So that's to the right.
You're really going outside of the area to get to that point. So your numbers kind of are in line. If we're talking about the United States, you're matching up with our expensive cities, out Los Angeles, not Manhattan, but, our North Jersey, Connecticut area, outside Boston. Your market price point is lining up with our high dollar metropolitan areas. So it's here in South Jersey, our median sales price is at $187,000.
Yeah.
So it allows an entry, a $250,000 is a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath home on 1/5 of an acre. So you're obviously well over 2 times that, but you're in line with Seattle or LA, not Miami, but some of our really expensive cities. So that's a serious number. Now, our issue, I'm going to compare New Jersey because in the United States, everything's broken down different between all 50 states, right? So our issue here is we have very high property taxes. We have what's considered the best schools in the country, but there's a price you pay for that. So those $200,000 homes, they bring with them an annual property tax bill of a little over $8,000.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And we have our mortgage insurance as well. We just call it PMI, but it's basically the same thing. So what does that property tax bill look like in Canada? Because, one of the things we hear down here is that Canadians are overly taxed compared to us. So is that a true statement? Or are you like 1% of your purchase price, like some of our other states are, or are you more in line with us where it's just nosebleed level?
No, it's much less actually. So, I'll go through a bit of data. So on slide 6, this is a home price index. So these are kind of what's called benchmark homes. If you go to the right on that slide, This is sort of the core of Victoria, the upper part of Victoria. So you can see the median prices are in the 800s, but our average house price is over $1 million right now. And that's just over $1 million because a lot of high-end homes have sold. If you go to the next slide down, so the West Shore is the less expensive of the areas. This is where I live. I live in Metchosin. So the median and the average there is actually quite similar. It's in the 900 range. This is more of a rural area. And then if you go to Langford and Colwood on the lower left in the West Shore region as well, these are both high development areas, and we're seeing a lot of people purchasing in those areas because it's good value for the money. They get new construction, and we're looking at $800,000 again for the benchmark price. And that's gone up considerably over the past 20 years. Like, relatively speaking, Victoria, the core, which go to the top right of that. So Victoria itself, this is when people come to Victoria, they land in the ferry just at the bottom of Victoria itself, right there. And you can see this blue area, Vic West. So in there is just where the harbor is. It's very, very popular down there. It's very pretty. It's kind of got this British feel. And so people want to live there. And then usually they go east to the kind of higher end area, which is Oak Bay. And there you can see the benchmark price went up from 1.197 to 1.213. So it's kind of like pretty even, only 1.3% there. And then in the West Shore, you can see Souk went up 11%. So people are moving to the outside of the city. This is what this graph shows me. Mm-hmm. Victoria itself just went up 4.2%. You tend to have people who are government workers there because they can walk to work, families who want to have low impact, kind of green type living because they only need one car or no car. Everything's within walking distance. Whereas on the West Shore, you're going to be riding your car. Now, if you go down to the next slide, so I did a couple of slides of what does $700,000 get for you. And I did that because that really is an entry-level home. This is a townhouse. We've just changed the terminology to row townhome. So things where you're sharing a wall with at least one neighbor. So this one is at 724. It was reduced to 714. It's just under 2,000 square feet. I see a typo. The monthly HOA is $492, which is fairly normal, and then the taxes are $3,000. And you'll see that on all the properties that I'm showing you, that the taxes are about the same depending on the area. And so what they do every year, we have an independent body called BC Assessment. BC Assessment looks at the values of these homes, looks at what's sold in the area between April and October. They're independent. They look at the same data we're looking at, and then they come up with an average. Then the municipality takes that average and creates what's called a mill rate. And generally, you're going to be paying, I pay probably $3,500 where I am. If you go to the next slide down.
Let me keep you there for a second. So you're paying about $3,500, but the area you live in, as I saw, was in that $900,000 range. So I'm going to put you in perspective. I'm on a third of an acre where we're talking from right now. I'm in 2,700 square feet. I have a nice pool, and I'm in a really good school system. So my house right now, I could probably list and sell for about $425, and my tax bill is $11,887.
So I live in a big home.
Right, bigger than my 2,700 square feet. Okay, that's fine.
My upstairs level is 3,500 square feet. We bought this house for a deal at $900,000 8 years ago.
So I'm going to assume it's worth well over the median right at this point, right? I mean, significant. Yeah. So you're basically in $1 million property that you have me beat in size by at least almost 20%, and you're paying almost 25% of what I pay in property taxes.
Yeah. But also, I'm not paying for sewer because we're on septic. I'm on an acreage.
Oh no, my sewer bill is separate. That's
Oh,
my property tax bill. That does not include my quarterly sewer bill because I get two of those in New Jersey, right? I get one from the municipality for transporting the sewer, their pipes, and then I pay another one to our county for processing and treating it. So
wow.
basically $148 every quarter on the sewer side. And that also doesn't include any HOAs or anything. So when we're looking at, if we go back to this row/townhouse, and we make those name changes too here, but usually the name change is based off of the price point, right? If it's a lower priced home, it's a row home. If it's a mid-priced home, it's a townhouse. And if it's a higher priced home, it's a carriage house, right? We change the name of it based off of where it is price point wise. But I mean, this actually isn't that far out of the realm of reality from some things I've seen in some of our areas that are close to city centers. But when we're looking at that assessment for the HOA, is the HOA at that number taking care of all the exterior of the home? Is that like maintenance and everything included and everything?
So they are going up. In 2013, we went through a revision of how people are looking at stratas as a whole. Strata means shared properties,
Right.
so condos and townhomes. And they were required to come up with a 30-year plan called a depreciation report. And with that, they started to increase their fees. And there's a certain percentage, 15% has to go towards their contingency fund. And so we're seeing 400, 500 is not abnormal. If it's lower than that, I really begin to question whether or not they're actually saving anything. It includes usually water, shared water, garbage, insurance of the exterior, maintenance of the exterior.
Okay.
So for that townhome, for a condo, it would also include sometimes hot water if it's shared. Also, sometimes heat if they have a shared boiler. That's unusual right now.
Okay. Now, speaking of heat, is your area as a whole, is it predominantly natural gas as we are, or are you still an oil-based, or what type of heat are we looking at? What's that utility look like in British Columbia and Victoria?
So mid-century, it was oil. It's moved to gas. We are an island, so the gas was a bit of a bit hard to implement, but now it's all established.
Okay.
There isn't gas everywhere in the island. I would say most people, if they could have gas, they would want it. We have now what are called heat pumps. Do you guys use that terminology, heat pump?
We do. Mostly our southeast gets it, or the mid-Atlantic region. So usually in like the Carolinas, Georgia, Virginia, they're run off of heat pumps because they don't get in the deep freezes like we do in the Northeast.
Yeah.
And we tried heat pumps up here, but our temperature swing is so drastic that they're not as efficient as they are just 3 or 4 hours south of where we are. So we're still forced air, 90% natural gas. We still have some oil tanks, but what we're seeing is, as you know, you might have had an older homeowner who had oil and everything was fine and nothing was broken, so they never changed over. And as the next generation is coming in, they're making the immediate conversion to natural gas from oil. The biggest problem we've had, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, at some point post-World War II, somebody thought it was a really good idea to take steel containers that could corrode, fill them with oil, and bury them underground.
Yes, we have that issue here.
I would love to meet the person that came up with that idea.
What's funny is the guy who does that in Victoria, who removes the oil tanks, his dad was the guy who installed them all.
Oh, that's the ultimate business plan, isn't it?
Yeah, and we also have an issue with, so like when somebody comes from Toronto here or elsewhere, in Toronto, one of the issues is freezing. And Here, one of the issues is water. So we have to be careful, especially with underground oil tanks, is often they'll rust because there's so much water in the ground. But luckily, some of them have clay around them, so they're encapsulated and they don't leak. But when they leak, it can cost thousands of dollars, and we're talking like $70,000. So now our insurance companies say you can't have a tank over 15 years, and it has to be above ground. And if it's not, you have to replace it within 6 weeks of moving in.
Yeah, we definitely have to convert to above ground. The insurance companies won't insure the tanks at all anymore. They got hit. They took too many hits, so now there is no more tank insurance. You're on your own, and it's the same as you, and it's an extremely expensive and time-consuming endeavor. This isn't a quick process that we go through when this occurs. So I'm looking at this picture of this home, and what is the name of the city I'm looking at here?
Saanich.
Saanich.
That's an indigenous name. You guys would say Indian.
American Indian. We have to clarify that. Native Americans now, we've changed it. You need a scorecard for every time we change what is politically correct and what is not politically correct in the United States, because it's an ongoing process. This to me looks like a starter home we would have in New Jersey, right? A typical sub 1,500 rancher with a garage on a decent sized lot. And, the price point still reminds me of what we would have in North Jersey or outside Los Angeles in the valley or something like that. So is this an atypical home, or is this an unusual property for that market?
I'm actually surprised it hasn't sold because, well, probably at $699 it will now. That is definitely a hot button for price in Victoria. And the 4 beds is nice. The 1 level is nice. It's on a fairly large lot, 6,000 square feet. It's in a great area. So if it hasn't already gone now, it will go at this price at $699.
Okay. Now, out here and in most of the United States, from every agent I talk to, the number one driving factor in price and desirability for us is school district and school system. And then commute time and walkability and all those things all fall in line behind that. But it's, the old adage in American real estate is there's only one rule: location, location, location. And for us, that location, location, location is education, education, education. Is there a big differential between school systems in Victoria or BC or Canada as a whole? Or are they pretty much on an even playing field?
So I came to real estate from teaching, so I know what you're talking about. And definitely in one of the former high schools that I used to teach at, we would get people coming from out of country just to go to our school. I will say in Victoria, we have an excellent education system. There's 3 school districts, and they're all great. We have what's called the Fraser Institute, which scores the schools. This one is near a really good high school and in a great area for kids who want to learn music or do sports. There's a couple of high schools that are kind of magnet. We've gone to the magnet system. So if you play a certain sport like rowing, soccer, football, hockey, you can find a high school that'll take you. But there are very few really bad schools. We kind of don't really have, I would say if we're going to find a school that's marginalized, it's going to be on the West Shore and probably one of the elementary schools but the high schools have all been refurbished. They've been redone. My kids probably go to one of the roughest schools and still it's a good school.
So, we have 350,000 people on this island and just 3 school districts. So these are large schools, I take it. These are.
Yeah. So they're right now, especially on the West Shore, it's one of the largest growing municipalities, the Langford and Colwood in Western Canada. It's just going gangbusters. So they built 2 new high schools. They had 1. They had 2. They built 2 more. And then now they're going to be building another one. And so the population of the school is about 2,500 for my daughter's school.
Okay. That's in line with one of our large top-rated schools. Our high school here is one of the top 100 in the state, so we're at 2,200 at Eastern High School. I always joke that New Jersey is cursed by being one of the original 13 colonies. Every one of those original villages still exists, and every one of those original villages still has its own school system.
Oh,
So in this state, we have 21 counties and 616 independent school systems in those 21 counties. So that's why it's very haphazard, because they're all different funding levels depending on the economics of their municipality, right? If you have a more fluent professional community, then they have a higher funded school than if you had more of a blue collar, lower demographic economically school system. So they're not balanced. Where it sounds yours, they're all getting basically the same funding for the most part. It's just a matter of who's attending now.
exactly. So I used to work for the Ministry of Education in British Columbia, and when I did my degree in education, we learned that the education system is mandated provincially here. What was in place when they joined Confederation and different provinces joined at different times was maintained. So in British Columbia, the public school system is funded 100% by public funds, and it's spread out. And then the French school system is also funded 100%. And then private independent schools get 50% funding. So in Ontario, I don't think the private school system's got any public funding at all. So it was all fundraised. So even private schools here are affordable for people who want to send their kids, and they have scholarship programs available for kids too.
I mean, that's a huge differential. I'm sure that most people don't realize. I mean, our private schools are just that, they're private. This has been discussed several times, but the concern is always that we're drained funds away from the public school system, which is already heavily strained financially as it is, and move money away from those. But if you're opting for, one reason we see an exodus out of the city into the suburbs, usually when someone's child is turning 5 or 6 and it's time to enter the school system or kindergarten, and they look at the inner city school system and they say, yeah, we don't want that. And they realize it's $25,000 a year for that private kindergarten. Then it's all of a sudden, okay, well, maybe we should give up this Friends episode style of living and this walkability and move to the suburbs and get the school system. That's a big swing. Or if you're I went to a private high school, St. Augustine's Prep. It was an all boys high school. And I have 2 great nephews that are going there now that are at my alma mater, and they're at $21,000 a year for high school on a private school. So there's a lot of additional expense. That's why the top rated school systems can demand high prices for their homes, because of the expense of not being in that school system is exorbitant. So I got to ask this question. You may not be able to answer it, and I appreciate that. Your property taxes are very low. You've got a really good school system. So how are you funding that school system if you're keeping the property taxes down? Because that's what we're using in New Jersey to fund the school system.
Because we're paying higher personal taxes. For someone like me, if I wasn't incorporated, I'd be paying 50% of my income to tax.
Gotcha. Okay. So
what's your rate?
So it's a sliding scale, and it's based off of where you're at. But I think our highest point is 39, but that's not the effective tax rate. That's why it's hard to answer your question in the United States, because we can't make anything simple and easy, right? We have to complicate it all. You may be in a 39% bracket, but by the time you take your deductions, your allowances, your write-offs and everything, your effective may be 30 or 31. But what they take out of your check is 39, and then you get money back at the end of the year. And then, so we don't have to be incorporated here as agents. We're considered 1099. We do what's called a Schedule C on our tax return. So I take those gross commissions and then subtract everything I spent during the course of the year to earn those gross commissions. Gabrielle's salary, the car, the computer, whatever we spent it on, and then come up with a net income, and then they're charged us a tax on that. But we were the unwilling unwanted benefits of the last tax reform that occurred, because what Congress instituted for their Wall Street buddies also benefited anyone who was a 1099 employee, because we basically were under the same status. What they did for the hedge funds and the LLCs apply to us as well. You're at I'm going to assume you're at a higher income bracket than you're in the top percentage points, right? Or I'm not asking what you make, right? But is an average Canadian or an average person in BC making low six figures, or let's say $100,000 a year, are they in that 50% bracket as well? Or is that a sliding scale?
I think when you're up over 150, you're at 50% for sure. That I realized when I came to real estate from teaching was like, you are just nickeled and dimed. Every piece of paper, every pen, every drop of gas, everything. Like, there's a reason why realtors, we actually don't have a very glamorous lifestyle. It's a lot of administration and dealing with people under stress. So it was way more regulated than teaching was. I could close my door and do what I wanted.
Right.
When I got into real estate, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting in trouble for all this stuff, all the advertising and marketing I was doing, anything creative, I had to have it approved. I had to earn 3 times the amount of money to bring in the same dollar amount that I was making as a teacher at the end of the day. So I just realized, oh my God, I have to work way harder, way differently than I did. So, and I've learned to leverage myself. I have a full-time assistant because I know that I have to be out there selling all the time in order to fund. I fund 5 people's lives. Like, I have a family of 4, and then I have an assistant. So I'm funding a lot of people's lives. So I don't mind paying my assistant just because I want a lifestyle.
I learned that early on is the only way to grow is to release some of the control. My biggest issue is I'm a control freak. Right. So I went into hiring an assistant kicking and screaming. My business coach was hounding me constantly to do it. And I just could not release that control. But once I did, it was liberating. Right. I got a better quality of life. I had a better relationship with my wife, my daughter, and my grandchildren and my friends, because I wasn't coming home from all the appointments and everything and then sitting down to do 6 hours worth of paperwork and contracts and administration work as well, and then exhausted and stressed. So I think for anybody anywhere in the world, having an assistant, if you're a producing realtor, isn't an option. It's a must, unless you want to go crazy.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you look at your money-making activities, if you're not doing your money-making activities and you're paying yourself to do your paperwork, you just lowered your income significantly.
That was the argument my coach gave me. He said, why are you doing $15 an hour work? And I was like, oh, good point. And then it was funny. At one point, I outsourced some of my administrator's work. And she actually got upset when I took it away from her, which was, stuffing envelopes and putting labels on it and stamps and everything, and outsourced it. Because I was like, well, I can get that done for $5 an hour. Why would I pay you your rate to do it? I'll just keep outsourcing it accordingly. Before we get into the ugly lies of the real estate world, right? Because they all told us make your own hours and unlimited income, and it was the biggest lie in the world. My clients make my hours, and the market kind of dictates my income a little bit. I mean, that number you threw out there, 50%, and I'm not going to touch on politics during this podcast at all, and I stay away from it as far as I can. But that's going to make any American listening to this like really step back and take pause, right? Because that's a scary number to them. But when you're paying that 50%, that's including your health care. Is that college education in there too?
No, but college education isn't as expensive as it is in the US. So my son is about to go to university. We've put in money in what's called a Registered Education Savings Plan, RESP. So we have about $40,000. Depending on where he goes, that's not going to break the bank at the end of 4 years.
Really? So if we're going to a mid-range university here, not Harvard, not Princeton, not Yale, Villanova or Seton Hall Prep, which are good mid-tier schools, we're at $65,000 to $70,000 per year.
I'm going to Google it. So domestic tuition is $5,600. International tuition is $38,000
Wow.
for a good university.
That's a slight differential from ours.
Yeah. It's not all about us. If I have a good friend in the US who had to have double knee surgery, it was $70,000. And she was about to start her a whole new type of entrepreneurial program. And she had to spend that money on fixing her knees so she could even go where she wanted to go. And here in Canada, that would be covered. So
you're not socialized medicine, right? It's universal coverage, right? You're all covered. You still have the same doctors and hospitals and everything and all that we have for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, so there was a post the other day about a mom who had a daughter who had to get necessary surgery, but it wasn't urgent. And so the doctor offered her a private care option, and the private care option was still $5,600. And if it was covered by our medical services plan, which is what we call it in BC, MSP, it would have been free.
Okay. All right.
But she just had to wait. So, and that brought up a whole discussion about the wait times right now, because with COVID, everything is being delayed. And so there's necessary surgeries and cancer.
That's the same here, right? That's the same effect we had here, because they're trying to protect those ICU beds and everything for COVID patients, not for my elective knee surgery, my elective back surgery or whatever. So but if I have a life-threatening issue, I'm getting the same timely treatment in Canada that I'm getting here, right? If I have a heart attack, I'm not going on a wait list, right? I'm going in and getting taken care of.
Yeah. Okay. And you're not going to break the bank. I think that's the saddest thing that I've realized, that people who get ill, it's not a good scene.
No, it's not. That's our issue. That's one of our numerous issues. The educational system's funded from those taxes, health insurance, obviously. I'm sure you guys have something similar to our Social Security system as far as the retirement program built into those taxes as well. So you're funding more or less off of the income taxes, less so where we're funding off of property taxes. And then do you have a sales tax as well, just like we do?
We do. We have a provincial sales tax. It depends on what you're buying. So like if you have kids under the age of 18, you're not paying for clothes or shoes, which I keep forgetting. I honestly because my kids look older, so they don't ask me, oh, how old's your child? And then we have GST, which is, I think it's 7%. Let me just Google that.
All right, that's on par. We're at 6 5/8 in New Jersey. That's relatively the same. So I guess the biggest difference between us tax-wise is the income level, but the property tax is substantially different. It probably, I bet if we ran the numbers on somebody, it might balance itself out pretty close. When we throw in those additional expenses, paying for health insurance, paying for university and the private schools and such, so it probably would balance out. But I think the affordability side of your housing due to the taxes, significantly more affordable from a housing standpoint. Even if my house were to double in value, if I picked it up and moved it to your town at $900, you'd still be paying less per month for it because of the property taxes on your mortgage than I am today on mine.
That's the long game, right?
Yes, that is the long game. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not being, as a senior, when I retire, I'm not being taxed back out of my house again.
Yeah.
Which is the problem we have.
And you can move 40 minutes north of here and get a beautiful, beautiful home and not pay that foreign buyer tax. Enjoy all the amenities of being 40 minutes away. I was going to tell you, though, you're talking about transportation and location. And I think that has changed with COVID, because now people aren't doing transportation to work. What used to be a 40-minute commute for us to go downtown every morning, we row in the harbor, and it used to be 40 minutes. It's now 20 minutes. And even now during rush hour, it's 20 minutes. And we are also finding that people are being moved from local to remote. But what's interesting is who is funding the home office? Is it the worker or is it the employer. And I think we're seeing that sometimes it's a worker.
Well, we're seeing here it's 100% the worker. The employer's taking on a huge savings right now. And I don't see any drops or corrections coming in our residential real estate market, but I do see it in the commercial real estate market coming very soon, because that employer realizes that I don't have to pay, I don't need 30,000 square feet in this A building in Center City anymore. I just need 10 and a couple conference rooms and some, offices to share, because everybody's working from home now. So that's where I think our next '08 effect is going to occur. Will be on the commercial side, not the residential side.
Yeah.
Right. Because of that. And I guess I think that's going to be a phenomenon globally, not American.
But because I think also it's going to swing back eventually. Like with all things, it's like people are going to be like, I need people. All our nurturers are going to be, I need a hug.
Well, I think, all right, so then Canadians are similar to us in the United States. Our pendulum swings to extremes all the time, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to go from the extreme of everybody's working from home, and then 15 years from now, we're going to go back the other way, and everyone's back in an office space again, right? And so, all right, that's just a human nature thing. That's not an American thing. That's good to know. I do want to go back and touch on the mortgage situation, though. But as a home buyer in Canada, I pretty much need that 20% down, right? I don't have the limited the limited down payment programs that are government backed, where I really need next to nothing to get into the game.
No, you could go as low as 5%, depending on the lender. 20% avoids that extra penalty of the
insurance.
The insurance, and then over $1 million, you do need 20%.
Okay, well that's we call those jumbos down here, and that's a 20% on a primary and 25% on a secondary home. But we can go down as low as 0 on a primary residence purchase, 0 down payment, which is a little crazy. So I guess brought up your COVID world slide. You're taking everything virtual, but this is basically your timeline and progress on making a purchase. Pre-COVID, it was a face-to-face consultation, I would think. Our settlements and our closings, not 100% virtual, but we're not all sitting around the conference room table anymore at settlements, right? It's just the party signing and that's it.
Yeah, and actually that never happened here. I've had people from the US come up and buy, and they're like, well, don't you sit down with the seller? No.
Yeah, that's our thing. All attorneys, the agents, the lenders, the clerk, everyone sits around the same conference room table at the same appointed hour at once, which 99% of the time is fine. It's when you had a tough deal.
Yeah.
Two were fighting and arguing with each other. Then we think it's a great idea to make them sit 4 feet apart directly across from each other.
I don't see the need for it. Well, here, actually, we run on a different system here. We run on what's called a Torrens system.
Okay.
So they actually meet with their lawyers. We have lawyers who convey the property, or notaries. We don't have separate conveyancers. We don't have separate title people. The lawyer or notary deals with the paperwork about a week ahead of time. They have a statement of adjustments. They meet with the buyer and the seller separately. You can't have dual agency. And then they sign the papers there. They sign the papers there. And then the buyer's lawyer registers the money against the title and registers any mortgages against the title. Our mortgages generally here, although the term may be 25, they actually only are for 5 years. People are refinancing all the time. Again, they go back to the lawyer to sign the paperwork if they're refinancing. Then I just meet with the buyer on the day of closing. We generally don't do a walkthrough unless it's an awful, disgusting property, because people are pretty good about leaving houses in good shape. It's very clean.
So that mortgage situation, so that sounds like what we would consider a commercial loan down here. So you're doing a 25-year amortization, but a 5-year balloon payment, basically?
Yeah.
And that's on all residential mortgages? I just can't lock in my rate for 30 years and be done and just move on with my life?
Yeah. You have to renegotiate in 5 years or 10 years. You pay more for 10 years than you do for 5.
Really?
And you can do open or closed.
All right. So what's open or closed mean? That's a new term for me.
Open means that you can pay off. So you have a variable rate mortgage and you can pay it off whenever you want. So you'd pay a little bit. So let's say the interest rate is 1.9. If you did open, it may be like 2.1 because the bank's taking a bit of a risk. And then in 2 years, if you wanted to pay it off, you could pay it off and you don't pay any penalty. And then variable rate mortgage means you're just going to float along with whatever the rate is over time. Closed means, and fixed, there are two different terms. Closed means that you're signed on for a term and that's the term. And if you attempt to buy out, you're going to pay a big penalty. And then fixed rate means that if you buy, let's say it's 1.9%, and you say, well, I'm going to bet that the interest rates are going to go up. So you do fixed rate. And so you just keep your interest the same over that 5 years. Variable rate will vary with whatever the rate is.
Yeah, so that's completely different than ours. You pick a term. Obviously, we can go anywhere from 7 years out to 30 years. Usually it's 7, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Your interest rate goes down as you select a shorter term, but your rate, in this market, no one's taking adjustable rates because there's no differential, but your rate's locked for whatever term you picked. So if I took you out to show you a house today and you took a 30-year fix, which right now you're going to be like 2.3%, if tomorrow, if you hit the Mega Ball lottery, you can pay that off in 100% and you just pay the 1 day's interest. So, and nothing in your mortgage can change over the locked rate of 30 years. It stays exactly the same at all times. It never fluctuates, but there's no payment penalty. What's that?
What if you sell? Can you move that mortgage to a new property?
Now we do have we do have something that I think is going to become, it's going to come back. It hasn't been around for a long time because obviously for the last 15 plus years, rates have been on a downward trajectory. But on our FHA programs, which is our government-backed programs, that mortgage is assumable. So if you bought the property today on a 30-year fixed at 2.3%, and 10 years from now you go to sell your property and rates are at 6%, your house will be worth more money because that buyer can assume the balance of your 2.3% mortgage.
They have to qualify with the bank.
They have to qualify with the bank, yes. But if you take out any other type of mortgage besides an FHA, then no. When you sell, your note and mortgage are destroyed and removed, and the buyer has to obtain their own. It leaves with you. It doesn't stay with the property. So it's never transferable, that's a slight differential. I guess I'm going to make the assumption then that 5-year refi timeline is what protected your real estate market in 2008, 2009. When we crashed over the mortgages, your banks didn't have as much long-term exposure there. So that was probably a protection phase for them.
That, and also wouldn't say profiling, but the diligence that the bank does is very extensive. So I had a guy a few weeks ago who wanted to buy a property. When he got a letter from his bank saying you're pre-approved, and I'm like, I don't usually get a letter, but okay, that's good. Thank you. I'll file that. And then we went and wrote an offer. And this is why I always recommend going with a mortgage broker as opposed to the bank, because the broker is going to shop the market for the buyer. And
Right.
they'll look at different banks and they'll look at different products and say, you fit here or here. And then they can submit the application to all three banks at the same time, or lenders. But in this case, the bank, we write the offer and then it's like, oh, you own a property with your sister. Oh, it's cash flowing. Good. So that's income. So you're making $600 a month. Good. Oh, by the way, you have a line of credit on your house. Oh, and all this stuff kept bubbling to the surface. And I always say to buyers, just be really, or even sellers, because they have to qualify to purchase again if they sell their home.
Yes, they do.
Really upfront. This person's going to know every bone in your skeleton in your closet.
Yep.
So just be right up front, because you're just hooping yourself if you're not being honest.
They're going to find it. You can't hide it from them. That sounds like an American loan officer. We run into that a lot, and we know certain banks are notorious for it, where they won't do their due diligence. They'll just do a quick skim, right? So they're going to say, okay, Jane, that's, they run your credit, and then they take your word for what's in the bank and for what you make, but they won't verify anything, and they'll issue a pre-qualification. And then when it gets to underwriting, like you said, all the bones of the skeleton start to come out of the closet, and there's a judgment against you, or there's you owe child support or alimony, or there was a foreclosure prior, or all this crazy stuff comes out because they didn't do the due diligence in advance. And then we run into that an awful lot. But I was struck when you said that we don't normally get a letter, and that's what we won't move forward until we receive the letter.
I'm going on the word of the broker that I send my clients to. So I say, can I show them homes now? Because I've learned since I showed a pregnant lady a house and she was 9 months pregnant that she couldn't buy it.
Oh, because she was going to be going out on maternity leave. That's a tough one. Right, we do that. I'll screen my client in advance. I call it qualification through conversation, and then refer them over to one of our preferred lending partners. And I'm good at that point when he says, yeah, they're fine, starting to show them the houses, but I can't submit the offer to the other side until I have that approval letter from the lender. So they won't even look at my offer without that letter attached. And then there's a big difference between the pre-approval and the pre-qualification letter. Pre-approval letter says that the loan officer of the bank has verified everything. And essentially, we're just waiting for the contract and the appraisal. The pre-qualification says they had a verbal conversation and they haven't verified anything yet. But based off of what they said, they can spend the $700,000.
Right.
So especially in this market, having that approval in hand and going to that next step, spending that extra week of getting everything over to the bank and letting them run through it and run it through their system and everybody look at it, saves you a ton of time just in losing or obtaining a property.
So on the after we write the offer, when they then go to do their due diligence for the inspections and stuff, the financing is about the house. It's not about the person usually. That's where the hiccup was on this buyer, because he hadn't been forthcoming. So generally it takes about 10 days to remove the financing condition, and then they move to the next step, which is subject removal. And then they put in their deposit. And I don't submit a letter about the client's finances because we consider that a private and confidential information.
Understood.
I do understand though, and as a listing agent, I'm going to ask people, well, has your client been pre-qualified? All this stuff is going to be asked of a buyer's realtor, but I don't necessarily provide it myself.
All right. So because now that I'm looking at your timeline, I'm seeing differentials. So I choose my new home. You write the offer and submit it. It's accepted. I then start my due diligence, but I haven't given any deposits or anything. Have I signed a contract, or where are we?
Yeah, so I would say 20 years ago, the deposit went in with the offer.
Right.
And still now people do that. But if the offer doesn't go through, we have to sign a release. And for instance, last week I had a buyer who wrote an offer on a condo, and then she decided she didn't want to go forward on it. And luckily she didn't give any deposit because the seller didn't want to release the offer. And we were finding in 2006, when the market really started to pick up, and that's when I got into real estate, that the deposit now goes in usually in Victoria 2 business days after removal of conditions. That being said, if we're going in a multiple offer situation, we may say, we'll be very upfront. You know what? This is a cash offer. We have $100,000 down. You accept my offer. The money's going in to trust tomorrow, which is escrow.
So, we're kind of similar to the latter. We draft our offer, we send it. Once everyone's signed off and we have a full acceptance, then we have 3 business days to make that deposit to the title company or to the broker or to the attorney's trust account. But that deposit's made before inspections even begin.
Yeah. I think it's just a local anomaly, honestly.
And this is why I love doing this, is learning how we all basically do the exact same functions, but there's a slight variation everywhere we go. So there was one I learned the other day. I want to see how your face reacts to this, if it's as bad as mine was. In North Carolina, when you make the offer, you then make a payment directly to the seller to purchase your due diligence or inspection time frame. That is non-refundable money, and the check is made out directly to the seller.
How much?
It's negotiable. And sometimes what they're saying is, in the crazy market, buyers will bump that up to $15,000, $20,000.
Oh my God. No.
So then it's a paid outside of closing if we go to settlement. But if I do my inspections or the appraisal's bad or something happens with my financing and I can't fulfill, that money's gone because all I did was pay for the right for you to take it off the market while I did my due diligence.
Yeah.
Which is another one of those local anomalies, right? But it's completely different. Or in New York State, you do all of your inspections before you even write the offer.
Yeah. A lot of people ask about that here, and I say no, because imagine you're the seller and all these people are crawling all over your house. Yuck.
Yeah, right. If there's part of me that says that's pretty cool, that it leaves a lot of stress for everybody down the line, but in the upfront, it's a lot of stress and hassle for the seller.
But I think as a buyer's agent, if you are going through a property with the buyer, you really want to know, I attend a lot of home inspections, so I want to know what the problems are that are going to show up anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I'm present for all of our inspections when I represent the buyer, because I want to see, feel, and touch when something majors. I find it's easier to see it and directly communicate with the inspector on site than just read about it in the report, because reading it to me always seems like it's worse than what he just talked to me about. Yeah.
Tone is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know we've been going a lot longer than we had. I've had a great time. I hope you have. I've learned a lot.
Me too.
I enjoyed it immensely, and I could keep talking here forever, but we both have businesses to run. So we're going to include all your contact information, everything in the show notes. I think it'd be good for anybody listening to us to include the PowerPoint there as well. Is that okay with you?
Yep. And if they want to know more about Victoria itself, they can actually follow along on our podcast, VancouverIslandTime.com. And we're also doing a similar show to you called He Said, She Said, They Said, which is about local real estate and talking about the ins and outs of being a realtor in Victoria. Just we alternate between items for sellers, buyers. This week coming up, we're going to be talking about our favorite areas. So just as another realtor and myself talking about what it's like to be in real estate and sort of removing the curtain of the glamour.
Yeah, we've run a series like that. We call it Tales from the Field. We can't make this stuff up. And all the crazy things we run into or see or hear. We're going to put links up for your website and your podcast and your YouTube videos and all for everybody that wants to explore a little bit more about Victoria and BC. And I appreciate all of your time. I did have a blast. So you have a great day. I'll let you out just in enough time for a late lunch. And take care. Have a great day, Jane.
Okay, see you later. Take care.